Good evening. Welcome to the stream, everybody. As always, I'll give folks a while to come in, but in the meantime, thank you for joining me. Just let me know if the music is ever too loud. I did some tweaking to some over the garden wall music, so that hopefully we won't be tagged by the copyright bots during the stream. I don't know whether we'll be successful, but I more or less dropped the speed on a lot of these tracks, so they'll sound a little bit different than they do in the show. That's on purpose. I also kind of like how they sound, honestly. I think it works pretty well. But yes, if you haven't already guessed, today we're going to be just celebrating and talking about Over the Garden Wall. Who knows for how long? Maybe for the whole stream. I just wanted to achieve something that gives, some cozy autumn vibes. We're officially in autumn now, I think. I don't really keep up with that calendar stuff. But I don't currently live in a place that has all the fun autumnal trappings. We don't have quite as many of the hay rides and the changing leaves on the trees and everything. And we do have pumpkins. There's some pumpkins around, but that's not quite the same. You don't quite get the same atmosphere as when you're living in a place where the entire landscape changes gradually, and you get to do all the fun fall stuff. Even I was looking around for apple cider today, and I couldn't find any for some reason. I don't know. They just don't have it in the stores yet. They have apple juice, but what is the point? What is the point of just apple juice during autumn? But ciders, that's the whole thing. So instead, I got a nice wine. There's a little gimmick to the wine, but I'll get there in a bit. But again, thanks for joining me. I see the Purple's here in the chat. In fact, I'll go ahead and put the chat on in our room here. There it is. It's up on the wall next to the fireplace, you see. Purple's saying, what a nice view of the fireplace. I'm glad you think so. I worked for probably too long on putting this sort of background thing together and trying to maintain a cheap look as well. But I think it's kind of nice. I wasn't able to get fireplace sounds and rain sounds to play in the background at the same time. I just didn't have enough time. Technical stuff, it didn't work out. But if you look closely out the window there, it is some active video of some rain falling in a forest, which I thought was very nice. Come to think of it, I should have gotten like a live feed of a coffee or teacup as well, but didn't get around to it. Purple also says, over the garden wall slaps. Yeah, I think that's the best. That's a pretty good way to sum it up. That probably encapsulates all the things that I'm going to say about the show. But here towards the beginning of the stream, I find it unlikely that if you've arrived here you haven't heard of the show before, at least, but just in case you haven't, it was a Cartoon Network mini-series that originally aired in 2014. The year prior, in 2013, Cartoon Network released a pilot of sorts. It was also just kind of a short film called The Tome of the Unknown, which of course features the main characters from Over the Garden Wall, gets us into that tone of the story, has some lovely visuals, has some fun songs, and apparently that short won some awards. I have to double check on that trivia thing, but apparently it won some stuff. People were paying attention, and so I think they greenlit it from there. So the pilot did what a pilot is supposed to do. It got attention to it, a positive attention. People at the channel apparently thought that the show would work. And apparently they were right, too. I think we can say that confidently. And even lately, I don't rewatch the show often. I try to save rewatches for almost special occasions sometimes because it's more or less the length of a movie. I think it's roughly an hour, 40 minutes, somewhere around there. So it's basically its own movie, released as a mini-series, but on rewatches, you can just go through the whole thing at once. In fact, I think it would feel kind of strange to not watch everything at once, unless you're really trying to savor it and doing like an episode a week. But anyway, yeah, I try to watch it during the autumn times. I think it's a great time for that. And it continues to astound me. And yeah, when I was doing some light research for this a few days ago and looking up the music and things like that, I was kind of shocked, well, partially shocked to see what an impact it continues to have on people. I can't say that I'm very familiar with the show's like hardcore fan base. I'm sure there is one, but I don't interact with them in any way. I've been on the wiki a bunch of times, but that's about it. But something that's really fascinating is even just on YouTube, if you go looking around for music and things, you will eventually arrive at what are essentially like chill lo-fi hip-hop beats to relax study to, but specifically pinned to Over the Garden Wall. So it'll have some voice lines from Over the Garden Wall. It'll have some stills or GIFs from the show in the background. I think that's great. It's also just kind of funny. But clearly the show captured something that people really enjoy. And I think, well, without delving too deep right off the bat, I think that a big part of its surface level appeal is that general sense of coziness and charm. You know, it really does capture so much about sort of a stereotypical autumn, or this storybook space that feels comfortable and familiar even though it doesn't actually exist. At the same time, there's so much room for horror and strange things. The influences on the show are numerous, but of course among them are early 20th century American cartoons. I think the little golden storybooks that are quite old at this point had an influence as well. Some of the art styles that you would see in those kinds of children's books seem to have reverberated into Over the Garden Wall. It's wonderful, yeah. But yeah, just the tone overall and the settings do so much to pull you in and keep you there. It doesn't quite feel like any other children's animation setting or that I've come across, at least not that I can think of off the top of my head. And I really appreciate that. I absolutely do. Purple says, is your favorite the pothead guy? So I assume you're referring to Greg. Greg is Wert's little brother. Wert and Greg are the main characters, along with Beatrice, their bird friend, their bluebird friend. And Wert and Greg are more or less, well, I don't want to spoil anything potentially, but they're just kids. They're just kids. And Wert is the goofy one. Sorry, no, opposite. Wert is the really sullen, dour, sort of moody one. And Greg is just the complete opposite, the foil. Just happy, upbeat, excited, funny without really trying to be. I do like Greg a lot. I think Greg plays a really vital role in the story. And not just as Wert's character foil, but in his own right, just as a character. I think he's really fun to watch, and I think he's another huge benefit to getting people interested in the show, especially initially. Hugo comments, hello, Hugo. Thanks for joining us. How's it going? Hugo says, Samuel Ramey was very good as the Beast in this. It was his first and only voice acting role, apparently. He's an opera singer, but in the show he only sings once. Yeah, well, I guess technically a couple times. The Beast has one like big song towards the end of the show, But also in other episodes, in passing, just for a few seconds, he'll sing a few lines. It is interesting to hear that he's an opera singer, because certainly his projection and his natural vibrato is really striking. It definitely makes a lot of sense that he was able to carry that over from his actual career. And it's funny, when he's just reading lines in the show, as opposed to singing, there were moments where I got hints of other famous voice actors, and I wasn't quite sure who it was. I'm sure I looked it up at some point. But I was kind of surprised. Yeah, I was kind of surprised to find out that he's a musician, vocalist guy, mainly. But anyway, thanks for sharing that with us, Hugo. Later on, I do want to get into a little bit of trivia and stuff, just things that I found online. I think that could be fun. But sadly, the trivia for this on IMDb and other sites, it's not that deep. There's a lot of repeats and stuff and some obvious things, but that's okay. Purple says, I wasn't aware it was based on a book. I'm not sure. You mentioned that because I left for like 5 minutes. No. Tome of the Unknown, supposedly, I guess. Although Tome of the Unknown was the pilot / short film originally for it. But yeah, book reference. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's tricky sometimes to bring up source material, especially going from books to film adaptation or television adaptation of a text, because the expectations are so different between the two mediums. And especially when you have people that are into the original source material as a book, I think sometimes they might have difficulty with the adapters taking certain liberties with things. And so I don't tend to think of it that way much at all. I just see it as its own show, or like I said, kind of just as its own movie. For me, it just works so well on that level that I'm not especially keen to go digging for, I don't know, hyper specific influences or interviews or things like that. I especially don't want to see a bunch of interviews about the show, which might sound silly, but I kind of like having it to myself. I kind of like just having my own experience with the show and not hearing much about intentions and interpretations. You know what I mean? I have my tea. This is great. I let the tea steep for way too long, so it's going to be interesting. Also, I will briefly show... Here we go. Terrible framing, but I'll show the wine real quick. So I got some wine for the stream, and it's hard to see in this lighting because the light's way too bright. But it is... It's a vintage 2014, which was the year that Over the Garden Wall was released. And the only reason I had the camera up is because, look, I have this poster of Over the Garden Wall on the wall. I won't leave this up for too long, but I did want to have it up for a bit. I like it a lot. I think I had another one of the Mondo posters in the thumbnail for this stream, and I wasn't able to get my hands on one of those. But I did grab this one. I was excited to get this one. I think it's the only Mondo poster that I own. But basically, they do limited screen print posters that have alternate art for various movies and shows, mostly. And sometimes they'll also do vinyl releases for soundtracks and things. In fact, I think it was Mondo who did the vinyl release for the soundtrack to Over the Garden Wall, which, by the way, I remember seeing it in stores all the time. I never bought it. I don't collect that much anymore. But when I was searching around the other day for images to use and music and stuff, I came across lit for sale listings of the vinyl, the records of the soundtrack. They go for insane prices, like $300-ish. I was seeing around that neighborhood. Okay. okay, it kind of makes me sad. Apparently they don't print it anymore. But Mondo's whole thing is kind of just, super limited releases, because then it kicks in that FOMO, right? You're like, well, I have to buy it because it's not going to be there anymore later, even if I don't really want it. And they do that with the records too, apparently. I don't know why they couldn't just keep printing them. Why, if you're making a profit, why not? Anyway, that's over there. And then the other major collectible for the show that I never actually, for a moment, I considered getting it. Didn't end up getting it. It is a cassette release. It was a tape cassette of that was supposedly Wert's tape that he made for Sarah, right? So it has his poetry recitations and his clarinet playing, and they released this super limited cassette. I don't know how many, a couple hundred, couple thousand. And so I've seen that. I'm curious now how much that's going for. I might have to check eBay real quick. I'm not going to buy it, but, garden wall tape. Let's see what they give me. $230 for that tape. So there you go. And yeah, the records are selling for about $200 now, which is insane. It's a little bit insane. So that's that. Purple says, I liked the way it ended. Most shows leave you wanting more or feeling weird. I agree with that. That's also a really nice spoiler-free way to mention the ending, Purple, so I appreciate that. But no, I totally agree. And there is even a little joke in the show of like, this is a great ending, isn't it? But beyond that, no, I think it wraps everything up quite well. It has a couple of pretty big twists in there that sort of change your perspective of the story as a whole. Which is great. It's wonderful when the twists can really make things more interesting and get you questioning things a little bit. And yeah, no, I mean, I think it does a great job of developing characters towards the end and having them sort of overcome their inner demons, sometimes catalyzed by external demons. But it's just great. I think it ended quite well. Although, this was another fun fact I saw. It was apparently originally intended to run for 18 episodes, which is very different. I mean, it would still qualify as a mini-series, I'm sure. But 18 episodes at, 11 minutes each? That's pretty substantial all of a sudden. That's what, now around 3 hours? Am I getting that right? Whatever. So I was really fascinated to hear about that. I don't know whether I would have liked that better. Obviously, it would depend on specific storylines and stuff. But I think as it stands, you have those 3 phases of the show where the first couple episodes you're getting acclimated to the situation and grappling with the goals and the stakes. And then you have several episodes in the middle where it's just one-off episodes. It's just their adventures through the unknown. Encountering different wacky characters and doing their best to find their way home. They're working towards their goals. We're getting a lot of character development, fun songs, all that great stuff. And then the final phase of the show, the last few episodes, is really ramping up to the climax. So I assume if it was extended to 18 episodes total, it would have had a lot more of the middle section, where it's just the one-off adventure episodes that kind of feel like, I don't know, chapter book stories or something like that. And I'm not sure if that would have felt right for the if it would have felt right for the show's pacing overall. Certainly if we view this as its own movie, stretching it out to 3 hours and having this massive middle section where the stakes are relatively low, and it might mess it up quite a bit. The consequences might not be so serious for a mini-series. But either way, I think I'm just happy with what we got, basically. 18, maybe a bit too much. Certainly would make it harder to do rewatches. Yeah, gosh. Purple says, I looked up over the garden wall and got your stream. Could be because I watch your channel, or because this is the only video talking about the show in 5 months. Maybe. Maybe. I have a feeling Google just knows that you watch my channel already, so they're just recommending relevant stuff. But it's possible. I did see, because of course the algorithm once you start researching something, it just throws videos at you that are sometimes related, sometimes not. But one that came up recently is someone, it had a title of something like, is, Over the Garden Wall a masterpiece, basically. I think it said it was released 10 months ago. So within the year, although it seems like a strange time of year to release that, because that would have been summer, I guess. Anyway, so like I said, the show had a massive impact. People are still very excited to talk about it and kind of break it down and analyze things and listen to the music, all that stuff. So I'm not surprised, but I do think the discussion, the discourse has died down quite a bit since the mid 2010s. I think it was really at a fever pitch then, and there were plenty of video essays and people talking about it, just jamming on it, sharing thoughts. But yeah, there's still quite a bit out there, I think. Pop this down now. Hugo says, "I'm the Highwayman and I make ends meet." The Highwayman, it's funny. I was about to say that the Highwayman is like one of the most successful, like children's animation horror villains in a long time. I think the Highwayman is very creepy. Obviously, his song is very creepy and disturbing, and the fact that they don't elaborate on anything makes it even more creepy. But while I was doing research again, I came across, there's a fun... Let me read off the actual fact, because it's about another character that got cut from the show, who's going to have their own episode. And just the premise, I was like, what? That sounds a little bit too... sounds a little bit too dark. Let me see if I can find the episode. Here we go. I don't know if it's just on IMDb, so who knows whether it's true. But it says, one of the episodes that didn't make the final cut was a man who makes dice out of the bones of kids. Sounds pretty good, right? That sounds pretty solid. That's sort of similar to Anti-Whispers, I suppose. But still, I'm sure they could have done something cool with it. Also, that fun fact, the way it's worded, it's just some person saying it, so who knows. But I wonder if there are episodes that were produced that were cut. I think there's no way they would have been fully finished and then cut. But, like, at the very least, there might have been storyboards and animatics ahead of time, which means if those exist, there's potential that they could, Cartoon Network could try to capitalize on the pretty rabid fandom of Over the Garden Wall and eventually release those in some kind of crazy expensive box set collector's edition kind of thing. So that is a very interesting possibility to me. Anyway, I've been blabbing about the show for a long time. How's everybody doing, though? It's still just a stream. It's still just a nice casual stream. I might even play some Animal Crossing later just because that's what I've been doing. And since it's also fall on my Animal Crossing island, I thought it would still be relevant aesthetically. I'm in the midst of a giant Animal Crossing island redesign and overhaul, which takes a very long time, but I also haven't finalized my plans yet. So I would totally be open to input from other folks. Because for now, it's just been kind of a relaxing sculpting thing, just changing cliffs around and moving stuff. It's pretty great. Purple says this was on Cartoon Network, not Adult Swim. That's correct. Yeah, it's a kid show. It was intended for a younger audience. Although, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, technically same company, all owned by Warner, right? I think it's all under Warner Media. By the way, that's one reason why I was trying to be extra careful about playing some of the music on the stream, because Warner Media, in my experience on YouTube, tend to be sort of especially aggressive about copyright claims and strikes. I've had some real trouble with using even short clips from Adult Swim shows or Cartoon Network shows. So, just wanted to put that out there. But yes, it was originally just a Cartoon Network. Yeah. Cat Cam is in the armchair, and what you guys didn't see before the stream started when I was getting set up, I have a nice pad here on the table with a nice cozy texture to it, and Cat was just sitting right on the table for a nap, so I was hoping for double Cat Cam, and if she comes back around, we'll do it. Hugo says, I just have a row of fruit trees. That's it? That's all you have on the island is just one row of fruit trees? I did toy with the idea of having like the entire island just being a huge forest and you can barely see anything. I don't think that would be especially fun to play around in because it would be hard to get anywhere. You wouldn't be able to see anything on the ground. You want to come up here? You want to come sit? Come here. Come on. Come here. Do you need help? There's a lot of stuff in the way, that's all. By the way, this wine it's all right. It is fine. What is it again? It's a Toscana. I don't usually get Toscana. Vintage 2014. Somewhere in Italy. Indicazione Geografica and Tipica. I assume those are the varieties that are blended in here. Nope, it's not. It's Sangiovese. Is it Sangiovese or Sangiovese? Cabernet Sauvignon and Syrah. It's all right. It's fine. I'm not a big wine guy, but it's all right. You want to come up here? Come sit. Come sit. Hello, Chill Vibes. Thanks for joining us. Chill Vibes says, Hola, and Wert looks similar to Link from The Legend of Zelda. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, certainly same color hair, more or less. I think kind of a similar stature. Or at least if Link was drawn in like the Over the Garden Wall art style, I think it would probably look pretty similar. Also, I do think Wert is meant to be some version of like the prototypical hero, right? The adventuring hero. I do think that's kind of his role in the story, although he's certainly a much more negative, pessimistic hero than we tend to get in a lot of other stuff. But yeah, Wert, oh my gosh, you could write a book just about Wert, and I'm sure they have. Like in the original book, if that's real. Or maybe they made a book later to capitalize on merchandising. I don't know. We'll have to look into that sometime. What was the other fun fact? I saw something that caught me eye. I wanted to read it out loud. What is it? Okay, so originally, Wert and Greg... Oh, I guess it's kind of a spoiler. I'll dodge that one then. Never mind. Lullaby in Frogland. One of my favorite episodes, by the way. Quite nice. Very nice. Oh, I can't find that thing that I was looking for. But apparently Patrick Mchale originally had the idea back in 2004. Like I said, it wasn't until 2013 that Tome of the Unknown was released. If you're not familiar, Patrick Mchale, or Pat Mchale, was also pretty instrumental in Adventure Time, as far as I understand. I'm not an expert. I don't know everybody's role on every show. So he was already a Cartoon Network guy. Prior to Over the Garden Wall, he was already working professionally in animation. So, makes sense that he already had a foot in the door, so to speak. Kind of 2 feet, I guess, if you consider it that way. Wine, yes. The French champagne. I'm not crazy about champagne myself. Kind of gives me a headache. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But anyway, something I would be... I don't want to do like a full ranking. I considered doing like an episode ranking for Over the Garden Wall. But for one thing, I thought that would involve going into too many plot details. I didn't necessarily want to do that on stream. And besides that, I don't know. It seems a bit blasé to me. And I think it would be pretty difficult to. I like a lot of the episodes, a whole lot. But regardless, I would like to hear about some other people's favorite episodes, maybe like 1 or 2 episodes that really stand out to you, 1 or 2 episodes that you really like to go back and rewatch. That would be very interesting to me. And then in the meantime, I could try to think of some of my favorite ones. But it's kind of tough. You'll have to pull up a list too. Purple says, I've entered a hole of Wert roleplay, rabbit hole of Wert roleplay, okay, and people singing the songs. This reminds me of the Cafe Cat Boys rabbit hole you fell into. Yes, Neko. Well, one of their early streams, we were looking at the Neko Para Catboy visual novel dating sim games on Steam. And by the way, even on my Switch, I keep seeing those games pop up, and I guess it's a pretty big series. If I got one for dirt cheap, I think I would play that on stream. I think that'd be kind of fun. I don't really play any visual novels, dating sims. That's not really my thing. Cat boys are not a thing. I didn't know they were a thing. Basically, until I found those games. I thought that was kind of funny. But yes, yeah, people do some cool cosplay for this show. People have done some excellent covers, especially piano covers of songs from the show. Just last year, the Blasting Company, which was a group responsible for the vast majority of the music used in the show, the score music, as well as a lot of the vocal songs, released a kind of a demos record. It's called Sketches of the Unknown. And yeah, it's demos, offcuts, things that they didn't end up using in the show. It's quite good. In fact, the song that we're listening to now is a heavily altered version of one of those tracks. I think it's very nice. I think I almost enjoy the recording style more on those demos because it's totally naturalistic. It's just like a live room recording. It probably wasn't set up too heavily. It probably wasn't in a studio. You can just hear the acoustics of each room. I think that almost works better for the tone of the show than hyper professional dead sound acoustics, that kind of thing. But just my take. Also, I guess a Wert costume would be pretty simple, right? That's kind of the joke in the show. Again, without getting into spoilers, it's a very simple costume. It's just kind of different pieces thrown together. It's lovely. Yeah. Oh, we get the wine pouring sounds right next to the mic. I didn't think about that. Hopefully it's cozy and appetizing. Can you be appetized for a beverage? What would appetizers for drinks be? This is an important question. Anyway, Chill Vibe says, my favorite episode is Babes in the Woods. I love the queen, and I don't know why, but she reminds me of the great fairy in The Legend of Zelda. Just wanted to share that. Thank you for sharing that, Chill Vibes. I appreciate that. I also like your, I think it's a Kiki avatar photo there, as far as I can tell. Kiki's Delivery Service was probably my favorite Ghibli movie. Don't tell anybody that. Okay. Babes in the Woods. Yeah, if I remember correctly, Babes in the Woods is the one, it's the Kingdom in the Clouds, right? Yes, the queen you're referring to. Yes. Certainly when I first watched the show, it might still be, but that was always one of my favorite episodes. And I would go back and rewatch that all the time because it is definitely the episode that features animation that is the most clearly directly based on early 20th century American animation. And even just illustration, like it feels old in a really good way. And in those scenes, Greg feels out of place visually because he's from the real world, quote unquote. And then we get all these characters that look, yeah, they have that wonderful quality of old illustration and animation from early 20th century, or yeah, illustration, even like cartooning from the 1800s. Is that, yeah, it's kind of inherently creepy. They're like a little bit too detailed, and they're not aesthetic styles that have remained popular, so they also just feel strange to us, I think. but such a cool episode. And I grew up watching a decent amount of, not exactly 30s cartoons, but certainly 40s and 50s stuff, Hanna-Barbera stuff, old PSAs, some propaganda cartoons, just a ton of old animation that is kind of always a little bit creepy to me, while also being really fun. In fact, if you guys remember the Dodo episodes, I think it was Looney Tunes, right? Because he would be hanging out with Bugs Bunny, I think, and Daffy Duck and some other people. And the Dodo bird's whole thing is that he's just a nightmare creature, and he just, you know, ruins your life and doesn't let you escape. I loved the Dodo bird episodes of maybe Looney Tunes it was. Oh my gosh. Purple says it's been like 3 years and probably more since I watched the show. But what stuck with me was the mansion episode. Oh, another good one. Yes, with Uncle Endicott. I think that episode is called Mad Love, if I'm remembering correctly, because it is ultimately a love story. I don't think that's a terrible spoiler. It's also one of the episodes that features voice acting from John Cleese, and I know at the time I was very impressed that they got John Cleese. Since then, I've found out that John Cleese has done quite a few voice acting roles that were not quite as prestigious, not quite as high quality. I mean, he's always good, but sometimes he's done some projects that were a bit subpar. But in this show, I think he's wonderful. He plays, Uncle Endicott, and then he also plays Adelaide, the good woman of the woods, or Adelaide of the... Oh, it's Adelaide of the pasture, the good woman of the woods. So it's like, okay, so is the pasture her thing? Or is the woods, or is the whole world woods? And she just happens to be in the pasture. That's like her zip code. This is another important question. But I love that episode too. It's great. It's fun. That one's pretty light. They try to build in this sinister element, and it kind of reaches some creepy moments towards the end. But overall, I think it's just a fun time. It also introduces Fred the horse. I think his name is Fred, right? Who's played by, I think he was one of the writers on Seinfeld. This old research and stuff I looked up is just like coming back around. I think it's maybe correct. But I'll pull up an episode list because I want to talk about some of my favorite ones too. Although both of those totally, certainly Babes in the Woods is like an all-time one for me. But here, IMDb must have an episode list. Give me an episode list, please. Episodes 10. That's right. Okay. Hugo says, I think the whole world is woods in the show. That's why people get lost very easily. I like that idea. Isn't that a neat idea? I don't know. It's like almost a magic realism thing. It's kind of a fantasy thing. Even in other fantasy stories, I've always loved the idea of like the big giant forest, you know, that's really hard to find your way through. And even in the actual world where we live, I've always wanted to visit the Black Forest in Germany. It's a very famous forest, a lot of old growth, kind of creepy. And by the way, here's a fun story about the Black Forest. I never ended up getting to go there, unfortunately. But there was a time in my life where, long story short, I was living in a castle in Europe for just a little while, and it was a very interesting time. But anyway, one of the women at the castle, who had been there for a long time, was very familiar with different parts of Europe. Someone brought up the topic of the Black Forest in Germany, and she said something along the lines of like, if there are ghosts anywhere on the planet, that's where they are. And I thought that was like the best. And she didn't even mean it in like ooh, it's spooky. No, it was like almost a positive thing, of just that it's like not even necessarily a spiritual place, but just like a very old place, a place with some kind of soul. I thought that was fascinating. Unfortunately, I've never gotten to go there. I would love to one day. Hugo's clarifying Fred Stoller was the voice actor who played Fred the Horse. Sounds right to me. I also have a list of the episodes pulled up, so I will scan through those and try to pick some really good ones. But anyway, Chill Vibe says, I have one question. So during the whole show, are we watching Wert and Greg dying? Ooh. So, I'll try to engage with this without getting into heavy plot stuff. But there is potentially there's a lot of things you could see in this show. It's incredibly interpretable, which is one of my favorite aspects of it. And a lot of other people have had fun analyzing the show as well. In fact, on my website, which I don't tend to do any real serious work there, but a couple years ago I put up an Over the Garden Wall kind of analysis article, and it was just my sort of pitch for like, here's how I interpret the show. And I sort of touched on this idea. I sort of touched on like, what is the, not meta story, what is actually happening? Like, what is the show actually trying to communicate about these characters' experiences? Is it just purely the regular arc of them overcoming, personal hang-ups? Is it something more sinister? Is there an actual sort of supernatural force that's putting them in this situation? Certainly there are seemingly supernatural forces at work in the unknown, which is what this place is called, where they happen to be lost. Certainly even it being called the unknown is very evocative, right? Like we can immediately start trying to assign meaning and relevance to other aspects and specific characters and locations within the unknown. So I think that was actually kind of a smart move if they wanted to really get people engaged with potential interpretations of the show. But as to whether or not we're actually watching them die, I'm not sure. And like, any interpretation is valid. I guess I personally think that this is their actions throughout the show and the adventures they have are certainly a kind of testing grounds, I suppose. They are undergoing what do we call it? An experience that's going to change them permanently, basically. And there are certain things that they can't get around. There are certain forces in the unknown that they just have to deal with, but there are many other areas where they get to make their own choices, and they get to choose their path through the unknown. And I think that serves as pretty good basis for an argument to say that this is just them growing. It's kind of a coming-of-age story, kind of, for both Greg and Wert. So you could say that sort of symbolically they die, the old selves die, if that makes sense. As they metamorphose into the new selves, right? But no, it's an interesting idea, and I have heard other people bring up that idea for sure. And it's a very interesting one, definitely. Purple says, The Rock, Greg stole, is the best arc of the story. Prove me wrong. Yes, The Rock. I don't think The Rock has a name, but Greg uses The Rock to tell rock facts, which are sometimes true and sometimes not, and it's wonderful. And at one point, I actually gave someone a gift. I made a replica of The Rock, and it was basically perfect, and I have no idea whether they kept it or not. Hugo says that they went into limbo or another world due to what might happen right before going into that world, and that's a rock fact. Very nice. Another interesting interpretation. Well, I guess it's in the same vein, but certainly potential for that to work too. And I have another comment there that I'll get to in a second. Purple says, I just remembered rock facts. Oh yeah, one of the best parts of the show, even though it only comes up a few times. Hugo says, but all of this stuff, it all happens as the frog, when the frog still has the bell. Oh, that's a very specific plot thing that we could potentially get into. Probably won't. But yes, the frog of many names, technically has a magic bell inside it, which is a bit of a thing. Maybe after a certain point, he didn't have the bell inside of him anymore, if you know what I mean. I want to stay open to that possibility. Anyway, one of the specific points I wanted to make about, on the topic of interpretations and analyzing everything, talking about different interpretations. I think one of the best things they did, consciously or unconsciously, to encourage that kind of interpretation on such a wide scale and in such an enthusiastic way, from what I've seen, is by not answering a lot of stuff. They don't elaborate on every little thing. They're not explaining everything. They're not dumping exposition on you. There isn't a certain episode where everything becomes completely clear. We definitely get a lot of details filled in as we go along for really, really solid, relevant stuff. But outside of those, just like, what is anti-whispers exactly? They're not going to tell us. That's not important, right? So it's just left out in the open. And when you leave those threads, sort of those woolen threads, Adelaide, of course, floating in the wind, people want to, find it, tie it down to something. They want to say, no, there's got to be, an actual answer, right? There's got to be meaning to every little thing. And you can find meaning for every little thing. You can find an interpretation that works for all the little different threads. And I think it's a lot of fun to do that sometimes. Wow, I really hope they don't copyright claim the music. Gotta pour some more wine. Also, I hope that the background hasn't become too boring. I will probably I'll try to put on Animal Crossing a little bit, but I was just going for ultra coziness for the most part. I do have blankets here and everything, but it's kind of terrible timing because the last couple weeks have been relatively chilly in California, like getting down into 50s and 60s at night, which is great. It kind of still feels like fall, even though we don't have all the leaves changing color and stuff. But just today, literally today, was the first day in weeks that we've had it up to like 90 degrees, and it's basically just back to being hot and humid again. I was so excited to wear sweaters and get out a bunch of blankets and stuff. Not yet, said the weather. Sorry, I'll get back to chat. Chill Vibes says, wait, no, I think I skipped one. I did skip one. Purple says, I thought the worlds just coexist and anyone could go deep in the woods and be in the same world. Interesting, like a potentially interdimensional thing, right? So technically existing at the same time, maybe even in the same space, but separated by dimensional boundary. I can get down with this. Chill Vibe says, can you do a video about Legend of Zelda and Over the Garden Wall? Ooh, I really appreciate that. I think it's just so interesting. There's so many similarities, and just it was only me who spotted them. It's a very interesting idea. I do think there's potential to, well, aside from some of the specific character similarities and design similarities that you've mentioned previously in the stream, Chill Vibes, I think on top of all that, there's also potential to examine how the monomyth, the hero's journey, can be applied to both. Because as we know, I mean, without getting into a bunch of Zelda lore, which is a whole other bag of worms, there's essentially just one story that's repeating itself over and over and over again across multiple like realities and timelines and things. And it's essentially the hero's journey, more or less. It's essentially the monomyth that Joseph Campbell talked about. If you're not familiar with him, he's still a pretty big name in narratology. I mean, he's dead, but his work is. And his book, Hero with a Thousand Faces, is very, very famous. It influenced a lot of people, ended up writing big movies and stories and stuff. And he basically put forth this argument that across every human culture for more or less all of history, we've been telling more or less the same story, just with some of the details changed. But at the core of that story is, hero's journey, hero rising to the challenge, changing, going through a major transition. There's a lot we could say there, and I do like talking about narratology. Probably don't have time for it right now, but I do think that would be another very interesting dimension to talking about both Zelda and Over the Garden Wall and what they have in common. It's definitely an interesting idea for a video. Whether I could do it justice, I guess, is another question. And I'm definitely not as knowledgeable about every last bit of Zelda lore as I am about Over the Garden Wall. But no, still a very interesting idea. So thank you for bringing that up. And who knows if I don't end up getting around to it. I mean, I would highly encourage you to think about making the video yourself, or putting that discussion out there. I think that would be great. I also wouldn't want to steal anything from you. I don't think that would that wouldn't feel nice. But a very interesting topic. And now I have to focus up because I keep getting off track. But Purple says, boring word like cozy. Good. Well, sometimes they're one and the same, I think. Maybe cozy just means you're willing to put up with boredom. How about that? How about that little nugget? Purple says the time was the same in both worlds in Over the Garden Wall, I believe, but I'm not sure. Well, not the same. Like, I don't think time was moving at the same rate in both worlds, if we're calling them worlds and not imagined spaces and stuff. Because we get some very clear communication of how much time has passed in the one world. It's tough to not get into too many details here, but it almost seems like a Narnia thing where time is moving differently in the original space versus the fantasy land where all the crazy stuff is happening. So I got more of those vibes, I guess. But who knows? I don't even know how much time actually passes in the unknown as we follow Wert and Greg around. Sometimes you see them sleeping and going into the next day, like in Lullaby in Frogland, which might be my favorite episode, actually. Now that I'm looking at it. Anyway, who knows? It's very interesting to talk about that. Purple says, I'm going to jump over the wall now because it's around 10 p.m. Good night, dog. Good night, Purple. Thank you for joining us for our little Over the Garden Wall party. I wish we could all be watching it. I don't think I can't stream that for sure. And making sure other people have a place to watch it could get very complicated. But thanks for stopping by, Purple. I appreciate it. Hugo says, Jason Funderburker is telling the story? ? He shows up right. He shows up right in the beginning of the intro and sings it. Okay. Jason Funderburker is the key to it all. Could be. I mean, that's the thing, right? Any like I said, any interpretation is valid. Anything that feels like it works with a lot of the story details, I think is just fine. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, Jason Funderburker's an interesting character. I feel like I don't want to say that we needed more Jason Funderburker, but I was certainly intrigued by the few scenes that we actually get with him towards the end. It's really something else. Yeah, should switch to the T, huh? Hugo says that's the name of the frog. That is the last name of the frog. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I was referring to the human character Jason Funderburgher when I was talking about my interpretation there. But the frog is behind it all. I mean, it holds more water, I guess. It's they do make a point of that Jason Funderburgher's singing voice is Jack Jones. He's with us at the very beginning. He comes out of the void to sing the theme song. He wraps the show up with a sort of an outro song at the very, very end. I guess I mostly just saw that as a fun little visual thing and a very cartoony thing. Also, that's a repeated gag, right? That like, oh, by the way, this frog can talk and sing. I guess sing. I don't know that we ever heard him just talking. I don't think we did. But there's always potential. There's always potential that he's the secret, not villain necessarily, but sort of the secret catalyst. You could even argue that he's the one who got Wert and Greg into their situation, without going into too many details about how that situation came about. He traveled with them, didn't he? He was there the whole time for sure. Yeah. Jill Vibe says, I'm sorry if I bring up The Legend of Zelda. I'm just a huge fan of the games. Oh, you don't have to apologize. Are you kidding me? You don't have to apologize for talking about Zelda. We can talk about Zelda anytime. No, I'm definitely not a huge... I was super late to the Zelda series. So I don't... Like I said, I don't know a ton about the lore and the different timelines and stuff. It gets very confusing after a while. But I'm definitely a big fan of the... I think I've only played 3 of the 3D Zeldas, and then I've played 2 or 3 of the top-down 2D Zelda games. Loved them all more or less. Some are definitely more enjoyable to me than others. But specifically, yeah, I think it was a week or 2 ago, I started my third playthrough of Breath of the Wild. And it's just the best. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying it's the best one, but it's such a wonderful experience, especially the start of the game. And whenever I start a new run, the goal is really just to like see how much I can get done in like, you know, a day in real life, not an in-game day. And it's great. And I know where a lot of things are, but there are still little tiny corners of the map that I haven't seen yet. There's so much to do. I also just feel a lot more confident during new runs because I know how things work. But at the same time, you don't have a lot of strength or health or anything towards the beginning. So you have to be careful. You can't just run into any fight. I think it's fun. Yeah, even I've watched some speed runs lately and things. There's some fun stuff there. But yeah, certainly a world that you can get lost in any of the games. They certainly feel like very different worlds. There are different tones to the different games, obviously. But there's always meat there, if that makes sense. There's always a feeling that there's history. The characters feel vibrant and interesting. And even just earlier today, another YouTuber was talking about finishing a texture project for Majora's Mask and going into some of the details they found while looking through the game's files. And it's really fascinating. Just the tiny little things that the regular player would never see, but give hints into character stuff and yeah, just are further proof that so much care and work was put into those games and so much forethought in terms of character, story, sometimes lore. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating stuff. And that's why I would love to actually play the other 3D games and stuff and really get caught up on everything. Let me check my levels here. I hope the music isn't too loud. I also hope we're not getting called out for the music, but we'll see at the end. We'll see how it all shakes out. But yeah, let me see if I can get the the game machine running, if that shows up on the screen. Chill Vibe says, Wert as a character feels like Link's opposite. I don't know. Wert isn't very brave like Link. Yeah, I mean, no, I agree. I agree for sure. We also don't know much about Link. I think in a lot of cases, Link is kind of a blank slate, which makes sense if he's just ultimately a player avatar within the game. Like maybe we're supposed to project onto him to feel more involved in the story. That's actually connected to a big discussion we could have about specificity of character, not only in video games but other visual mediums, and how that affects how people interact with the media. Basically, anyway. That's a whole big thing. I can't get into that right now. But yeah, like I said earlier, yeah, Wert is not. He's playing the role of the hero, but that's not who he is deep down, or at least that doesn't define him. And I think that's really epitomized in the, what do you call it? I'll look at the episode name right here. It's right here. It is, no, it's not that one. Songs of the Dark Lantern. So the episode where they go to that little weird tavern where all the characters are singing different songs about what they do, and they're trying to enforce, or like trying to place a very basic broad identity on Wert, and it's not working. Like none of them are sticking, and that's the whole episode, right? It also kind of summarizes the Wert's role in the entire show, is that he's not just the one thing, and he also doesn't have a strong sense of self. That even translates to his costuming. It's just a mix. It's a mix of a lot of different things, and he knows what he likes, but he's also not super confident to talk about the things that he likes. He's not going to go out of his way to form friendships. And anyway, yeah, Songs of the Dark Lantern. Towards the end, they're saying like, "Oh, you're the hero now. That's who you are. You're the hero. Go save your friend. Everything's fine." He's not really. He does perform the function of the hero at the end of that episode and in some of the other episodes, but not in any stunning, over-the-top way, whereas what Link tends to do is very adventurous and heroic and noble in action, even if we don't understand the motivations in his head a lot of the time. Yeah, and in fact, one of my favorite Wert moments, and maybe just one of my favorite moments in the series overall, is in one of the last episodes. And Wert is in a group of people, I'll say. I'm really trying not to spoil stuff at the end there. But Wert is among a group of people, among a group of his peers, and he just thinks like, everybody hates me. I don't want to be here. Let's just leave. I just want to go back home and be alone. And then immediately everyone else is like, oh, hey, what's going on? Like everybody's fine with him. So his anxiety there, his social anxiety is completely unfounded. I think that's wonderful, and I think it says a lot about his character at more or less the start of the story. Anyway, sorry, another tangent. But thank you for bringing that up. Chill Vibe, thank you. No, I agree. They're very different characters, but in terms of the monomyth, they are both in that slot of the hero, even if for Wert, it's a bad fit, if that makes sense. Hugo says, where he is falls for peer pressure. Yeah, I mean, he can be swayed very easily, sure. At least, again, it's tricky. That is technically the beginning of the chronology for Over the Garden Wall, but it's shown at the end. It's a little bit confusing. But I think he's a great character. I think he does a lot to bring something new to the table. He's not just the bog standard hero guy who's gonna save the day and we're done. Here we go. Chill Vibe says, I think you're right. Wert is from the normal world, and Link is part of the fantasy world. See what you mean? Oh, sure. Yeah, there's that too. I mean, yeah, they fit their world building very well. They're appropriate for each of their worlds, right? But yeah, Link just, in a lot of the games, Link just has to be the hero, no questions asked. And in fact, I think even in Skyward Sword, they more or less just say something like, well, it was prophesized that you're the hero who's going to save the day. So go do that, I guess. It doesn't feel like he has quite as much agency, whereas in Over the Garden Wall, Wert definitely does feel like he's making active choices and trying to figure things out. Not to say the one is better, worse than the other. It's not the case at all. But yeah, different types of stories, ultimately. Certainly with different messaging. Oh, Hugo's clarifying the songs of the Dark Lantern is where he falls for peer pressure. Yeah. Basically anything that they say he is, he's just like, huh, okay, maybe. Except for the young lover there, he's like, no, that's not what I'm doing. Oh, what a fun episode. I guess I should try to pick I'll try to pick a favorite. Let's see what we get. Songs of the Dark Lantern has always been one of my favorites for sure. The old gristmill, the very first episode, I feel is one of the darkest, not just visually, but tonally. It's wonderful. Babes in the Woods, we already talked about. Wonderful. Some of the best visuals. It's another just one-off adventure, but it still has very high stakes in reality. It's great. I also love the strange concept that when you start to lose hope, once your mental resolve starts to slip within the unknown, that, yeah, just like vines and tree branches and roots just start to grow around your body. It's wonderful. That's so great. That's such a cool concept. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that Lullaby in Frogland is one of my favorite episodes. It's episode 6, so it's more or less right in the middle of the show. It is ultimately pretty eventful for the overall story. Some pretty major things happen in it, even though it starts with this very sunny, pleasant, low-stakes adventure where they're just trying not to get caught on a frog ferry. Oh, it's great. It has some great music. It also has some wonderful golden hour lighting towards the end. Just wonderful. Certainly an easy one to rewatch without having to go through the whole series again, basically. Hugo says, hard times at the Huskin Bee. Yes, Hard Times at the Huskin Bee is another really good one. That's definitely, I feel like that's actually one of the creepiest ones until the final twist where it's actually not so creepy. There's some strange stuff in that one. And in fact, one of the fun facts was about how the name of this town in that episode, Hard Times at the Huskin Bee, is Pottsfield Town, right? And that's a play on Potter's Field. And Potter's Field is like a very old-timey kind of slang term for like a burial ground where people couldn't afford actual burial plots. So end up in pots, to be sort of blunt. I think it's fun. I think it works well with the content of that episode and the overall story and the twist. It's great. But yeah, some really creepy imagery in that one. And just, I don't know, for a long time, that idea of being in a town full of crazy people, or maybe not crazy people, is just terrifying. Because, like, what do you do? What do you do in that situation? You try to get out. If you can't get out, you're sort of hosed. Yeah. Chill Vibe says, the Beast and Ganon are interesting villains. What's your opinion? And Hugo says, that's where potatoes and molasses come from. Yeah, I thought the actual food or the song. I know the song Potatoes and Molasses was originally in Schooltown Follies. There we go. Yeah. Cool. Hugo just clarified. Great classic song from the series, of course. Definitely a banger. But getting back to what Chill Vibes was asking about the connection between the Beast and Ganon. Yeah, in a way, like, again, with the Zelda lore stuff, like, forgive me if this is a sort of an inaccurate interpretation of all that, but as far as I understand it, the essence of Ganon which isn't necessarily Ganondorf, which is kind of just the guy. The essence of Ganon is supposed to be just more or less like pure evil, just a malicious, malignant force, a supernatural force that's going to keep coming back for more or less all of time. And certainly, if that's how we see Ganon, then the Beast very easily follows along in that line. Because we never know. Again, like I said, it's really nice that the show doesn't give us all the answers. And one of my favorites is, the Beast, where you just don't know. You kind of just assume, okay, he's this weird, evil presence, and he's doing some very clearly evil stuff. And he has this hugely intimidating presence. But at the same time, as things develop, and as his character develops in very small ways, we learn that he's also kind of vulnerable. And I think on the Ganon side, that's what we get from manifestations of Ganondorf, where he does have the physical form, right? That's where he actually gets some vulnerability and potentially some sympathy. Because I do think there are plenty of moments in the Zelda series where Ganon is even just a little bit, or actually quite significantly, sympathetic. I think it's great. Yeah, I think it's important for a villain in that type of story. I think it immediately makes it a more interesting story. And so I was happy to see a similar approach applied in Over the Garden Wall, where the Beast is never necessarily sympathetic, but we do start to see the Beast's limitations, the limits of their power, sort of a glimpse into motivations, ultimately selfish motivations. And I doubt that the show would ever get revived anyway, and I don't want it to. But if it did, I don't know if we would get any elaboration on the Beast. I feel like they would maybe just move on to a different villain. But certainly for the time being, it's fun to think about, like, what exactly is the Beast? Is the Beast corporeal? Is the Beast, I don't know, does it age? Is it sort of human? There's a lot to wonder about there. Definitely. Hugo says the Beast is just lazy and bad at lying. Maybe. I don't know about lazy. It certainly appears lazy, but part of that is like, again, spoiler free. The Beast needs to keep up that front of intimidation and power, right? Even if it's not actually there. So it makes sense that the Beast is constantly telling people what to do and like, oh, you got to do this or else you're going to be in real trouble, because it's a way of maintaining that sense of power. As opposed to just being too lazy. I don't know. Can the Beast sustain itself? That's another interesting question. Yeah. Oh my gosh. so much to think about. But bad at lying, yeah, kind of. Well, the Beast went in with confidence. I think that was the whole strategy. If I just do everything with confidence, everybody will believe me and things will be fine. And they were, until they weren't anymore. Oh my goodness. Wow, this is only our second or third time through the playlist too. I should have got more music. There aren't that many songs in the Over the Garden Wall soundtrack that are purely instrumental, so I was a little bit limited for sure. Let's make that nice and quiet. Yeah, it's just in the background. I also wish that I could have put some room reverb on the music so it sounds like it was actually in this space that we have here on screen. Again, not enough time. Should have prepared well in advance. Oh well. Hugo says, okay, I mean, the beast is not blue collar and does not want to sweat. I believe that for sure. Yeah, no, I don't doubt that the beast is like not only malicious, but yeah, a trickster. Sort of like some characters from folklore. You know, there's some stories about foxes being real tricky, weasels, which is where the negative association comes from there. Yeah, certainly seems like that trickster kind of character, or that character archetype. Although, yeah, that's a reveal in itself, isn't it? Like when we first see the beast, or when we first hear the beast, just in the background, it's all intimidation and power. We don't understand the vulnerability. We don't understand the limitations. And the lying, which ultimately ties into the themes of the show, I think. Yeah. Chill Vibe says, one interesting thing about Over the Garden Wall is that Wert has Greg, and unlike the Zelda games, Link is always usually alone. He's a lone hero. What's your opinion on this? Another interesting question. Thank you. Yeah, so Wert has Greg, and as I touched on earlier, I do think that Greg, from a purely storytelling perspective, I think that Greg's purpose is to serve as a character foil for Wert. It's ultimately Wert's story, even if it doesn't seem that way at times. So he's there to be the opposite. He's there to reflect the stronger elements of Wert's personality and his problems, mainly. So it makes sense to me. And I know Greg is still a nice, fully formed character in himself, and very funny, and adds a lot to the show in terms of making it accessible and fun. So I'm not saying that his only role is to serve as Wert's character foil, but I do think that's the main reason he's there. Certainly in the early stages of trying to write this out, I feel like that's when Greg would have appeared. Sorry if I mixed their names up there for a second. But yes, as opposed to Link as the lone hero, wandering alone, traveling, doing all the stuff themselves. Yeah, I think that if you added a companion, and some of the Zelda games have added a companion character, haven't they? But those characters never got in the way of Link's duties, of what he's there to do, right? And of his character motivations, even if they're veiled from the audience. In that way, I do think Link and the Zelda stories as a whole align more neatly with the monomyth and with the hero's journey than Over the Garden Wall does, even though if we interpret it more openly and broadly, they both fit in just fine. But yeah, I think it's, like I said, the characters have their differences. They still fill that role of the hero, but Link and the Zelda stories are I think they're much closer to what could be called the pure version of the hero's journey, where it's really just about one person doing the thing they were destined to do. And in fact, that's even been a source of criticism for for the hero's journey monomyth. What's the other word? Meta narrative. Master narrative, that's the term. These narratives that are repeated again and again within a culture, and in this case, multiple cultures. But yeah, that's been one of the sources of criticism, is that it does ultimately communicate one person saves the day, one person is naturally destined to save the day. And while I don't have a problem with how that's executed in the Zelda stories at all, I think it works perfectly well for the stories they're telling. I think it works perfectly well for a single-player video game. On a much broader scale, on an international, scale throughout different periods in history, I do think there are potential problems with communicating that it's one person on their own who does all the important stuff. For obvious reasons, I think there's some problems with that narrative. But yeah. Hugo says, what about the fairy that follows you around? Yep, a couple different games. Yep, we get Fi and we get Navi, right? Also, it was dangerous to go alone, so Link's never alone. There you go. Well, Link took the sword, right? That was the companion originally. But yeah, like I said, has a companion character sometimes, but they never overshadow. Whereas there are moments in Over the Garden Wall where I do think Greg does kind of overshadow Wert. There are even entire episodes where it feels like Greg is more of the focus to me. But yeah, I think his ultimate function of the story is to reflect certain parts of Wert. And also, just on the surface level, I think it would be pretty boring to watch this downtrodden, sort of sour grapes character trudging through all these different challenges. Also, Greg is story catalyst for a lot of this stuff, so he makes the adventures happen in a certain sense. So yeah, they work very well together. I think it's a very good pair, ultimately. Joe Vibe says, you should play the Fairy Fountain music. That's great stuff there. Oh, it's great. Oh, it's very good. Yep, I like the version from Breath of the Wild, and there's a version for Cadence of Hyrule, which is the Zelda spin-off of Crypt of the Necrodancer. That one's awesome. I love that version of the Fairy Fountain theme. Unfortunately, I can't play it right now because I'd have to download it from somewhere, and my internet will not allow that right now. It would just take some prep time. So, unfortunately, I can't play it at the moment. But oh, it's a great song. It's very well done, and there's something just soothing about it, even though it is kind of high tempo. It's great. But yeah, folks. Yeah, you know what? I just realized too. There's something I got to take care of here back at the house in a little bit. But yeah, we'll say that, like, I don't know, maybe 7:30 my time, I'll probably wrap it up. But I just wanted to put that out there. And yeah, maybe Animal Crossing next time. That could be almost a whole stream unto itself. But yeah, I totally forgot about something I needed to do here. But it's fine. I'll get it worked out. It'll be A-okay. Hugo says, when you guys think about Elijah Wood, do all of you think about the good son? Oh, sure. Yeah, that's the first thing we think of with Elijah Wood is the good son. Or wasn't he in it? Wasn't he in a Tom Sawyer thing too as a child actor? He did a lot of stuff. But yes, of course, that's my first thought with Elijah Wood as the good son. Yeah, no, it's a coincidence too, I guess. But I have been kind of ramping up to do a rewatch of Lord of the Rings, which I guess is some more fantasy stuff. We were talking about that earlier. But it's such a commitment, isn't it? But there's also something cozy about those movies, I think. But I don't know. I was surprised when I watched Over the Garden Wall for the first time and heard, realized that Elijah Wood was doing the voice for the main character. It ended up working very well. And I think it's tough. I think it's tough to be a sort of celebrity voice actor and not have your pre-existing public persona overpower the actual character that you're playing. But I think Elijah Wood did a good job of sort of transcending that and becoming Wert in a lot of these instances and just seeming relatable and weird and sad and low energy. It's kind of great. Ah, yes. Gotta stay hydrated. Chill Vibe says, one interesting thing to mention is that Wert plays the clarinet and Link plays the ocarina. Maybe they should play together. They would make a great duo. That's interesting. Yeah, I could be down for that. I don't know if I've certainly heard clarinet and flute together. But clarinet and ocarina specifically would be an interesting combination. Especially since I think the ocarina is an Eastern instrument, and clarinet, of course, is a Western instrument, as far as I know. Yeah, I think that Wert's okay at clarinet, too. He has a couple... he has that music on the For Sarah tape, which you can find online. And he also I think there's a track on Sketches of the Unknown from the Lasting Company that I was talking about earlier. There's a track called Wert's Clarinets that I didn't manage to get ready for the stream in time. It's very nice. Yeah, it's sort of just jazzy, loose clarinet. It's not played very precisely. It's not like orchestral playing or anything like that. Yeah, just loose and fun. I think that's an accurate reflection of not just Wert. Well, he's certainly not very fun most of the time, but yeah, he's inexperienced. He's trying his best. He's unsure of himself. The notes are wavering. I think it works very well on a musical level. Hugo says he's also at Summer Camp Island. Elijah Wood. Yeah, that's right. I do forget the role he was playing. He played saxophone the Yeti. Oh, there you go. Thank you for just wondering who was playing. Yeah, saxophone the Yeti. Mike Birbiglia's in Summer Camp Island too. Yeah, they have quite a few really excellent voice actors on the show, even just for guest roles, I think. Although I haven't gone back to it for a long time. It might be a time for to catch back up on Summer Camp Island too. But yeah, anyway, I'll probably start to wind things down now. Sorry I couldn't get the fireplace sound effects or the rain sound effects. I don't even know if you can tell the rain back there. Can I make it larger? Where is it? Rain. Here we go. If we see the puddles there, now we can tell it's raining. Yeah. Oh, I almost like that better. Although I like seeing the trees in the window, you know? Yeah. Oh no, look, the rain is covering up the fireplace. I didn't even notice that. Zoop. There we go. Hugo says that Saxophone the Yeti / Elijah Wood plays a big role in Season 3 arc. Oh, interesting. I'd be interested to see that. Joe Vibe says you should do the video about the Legend of Zelda and We're in the Garden Wall. I wouldn't mind. Oh, thank you. I'll certainly put it in my... I have a big list of video ideas. I'll add it to that. And just getting around to them comes down to motivation and time, you know, which can be a big thing. But thank you for mentioning that. I do think it's a really cool idea and potential angle for, yeah, basically analysis and interpretation, which is definitely one of my hobbies. Can I call that a hobby? To analyze and interpret stuff? Sounds a bit lame, doesn't it? Hugo says, what do you guys think about taking up the means of production? Marxism. How about that? Have you heard this? Have you read about this in the news lately? Thank you, Hugo. Oh my goodness. Let's just say it's another big topic, isn't it? Oh my gosh. This tea is way too strong. Yeah, I think that's just about it. I really appreciate it for anyone who stuck around to hear me ramble about Over the Garden Wall. I really didn't have a structure. Most of the work went into the background here. And beyond that, yeah, gosh, I'm sure I'll come up with something different for next week. And I hope if anyone hasn't seen the show before, they'll check it out. If anybody's watching the archive of the stream later on, thank you as well for coming by. feel free to leave suggestions of other ideas, other streams you'd like to see, things you'd like to talk about. I've also toyed around with the idea of just doing a suggestion box kind of stream, or a segment on a stream where people can just give their ideas, different things they would like to see on the channel. Can't guarantee that I'll do any or all of it, but I definitely like hearing that from people, because YouTube doesn't really give me any information. But yeah, no, it's been good. I'll just catch up on chat and close it out. But Chill Vibe says, so everything that happens in Over the Garden Wall was real because of the bell? Hugo argues yes. And there's also the fact that Beatrice and the Woodsman both have their own lives. Well, and yeah, you know what? If anyone's made it this far in the stream and they don't want to be spoiled, that's just I'm just going to go ahead and say it. So one of the last things we see is that musical sequence right during the outro song. And that's where they tie up not only Greg and Wert stories and their situations in life, but we get the endings of a lot of the characters from the unknown. I think the fact that we see any of that after Wert and Greg have left is proof enough that it's its own space. And on top of that, like, I don't know, I just prefer that interpretation in a way. It's also the very last thing we see, so it seems strange for that to also be imagined, I think. But that's certainly how I've always viewed it. It's just that these are the places where, this is just a place. This is just a place that exists. It's maybe a place where other people from our world enter into, leave from time to time. That almost ties into another Cartoon Network show that I won't spoil, but yeah, no, I'm on board with that for sure. I'm on board with it. Yeah, and Enoch is just a cat. Yeah, there's that weird twist, and the what's his name, the millman, the woodsman's daughter comes back. Yeah, like that's all just, that wasn't instantaneous. You know, they do seem to have their own lives. So, I certainly got the sense that it's its own existing place. But gosh, I think that's about it. Yeah, I've got to get out of here and handle some other stuff just back at home. But once again, thanks everyone for joining me. I hope you've had a good time. I hope you'd enjoy the background, because it's probably going away after the stream. And I really appreciate anybody supporting the channel. It's encouraging when a lot of this work can be very discouraging, so hugely appreciative of that. But until the next video, or until the next live stream next Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, I hope everyone just has a great weekend, great Friday tomorrow, and I'll be seeing you soon. All right, goodbye.